This image right here represents a number of things that truly inspired me as a guitar player. Now, number one is the player himself. The guitar that he's playing definitely influenced the purchase of this guitar. And there's a particular technique that he employed throughout his career that I found really inspirational and what I think really distinguished him from other great players out there. Now, those shredders and fast players certainly were out front, and what they brought to the table was obvious. But what Alex Lifeson brought to the table was the subtleties, and his greatness sometimes was hidden in the subtleties. And I've got 5 examples of this technique that I want to share with you today. Plus, there's a little bonus. Why don't you stick around? Alex Lifeson is definitely one of the biggest influences on me as a guitar player. And what I really found interesting about him is he plays with arguably the busiest rhythm section in rock and roll. So we have a lot less room to work with at times. And while he can shred with the best of them, there was something special about what he did in that band. He respected the space that he had and explored different textures, different types of chords that really contributed to that big sound that Rush had. And like I said, while he may not be put on the same pedestal as some of the biggest shredders out there, I mean, imagine Eddie Van Halen in Rush. That would be one very different band. And I suspect they wouldn't have stayed together as long as they did. Alex knew his place, and he added a lot of texture to that band. And one of the things that he did that you can find throughout his career was his style of arpeggios. That arpeggios are the way he played them, and there's a specific technique that he would employ within his arpeggios that was something you can find, like I said, throughout his career. So I'm going to explore 5 examples of that today. And whether you're a Rush fan or not, I think these are techniques that can apply to all different genres, and some really interesting things you could pull out using some of those techniques. So I'm going to share those with you today. We're going to play it on this Howard Roberts Fusion, which I fell in love with watching Alex play it. And to add a little extra visual to this video, my sister, who's a really great artist, works in all sorts of different mediums, agreed to recreate this photo for me. I want to have it here in my studio. So she did a digital recreation and captured it in real time, so you'll see this artwork developing throughout this video. Thought would make it a little bit more fun. So we're going to look at some arpeggio techniques, and we're going to watch a great painting being created all at the same time. Why don't we get started? So the theme throughout all the progressions that I'm going to show you today is there's a constant in every progression. By that I mean there's an element of that chord or a note within the chord that remains constant throughout the progression. Something on top, a single note, couple of notes. Sometimes there's a slight variation. But the idea is that chord progression contains elements that are constant throughout all the chords. So the first example, to help explain that, is No One at the Bridge. That's a deep cut on Cress of Steel, a B-side, inside the concept of the Fountain of Lamneth. Now, if you look at this chord progression, start by just looking at sort of a B5, and then a D. But the first one, the B, is played over an open E. And then you'll move that up, if you look at it as a D power chord or just a 5, and then play the B flat on the E string, so you get, but the constant is an open G, so you get this effect. And then every few bars there's a walk down. Really, really interesting effect. Let's take a closer listen to that. So the second example sees us moving into another concept, and that would be 2112, and that's the soliloquy. Now, using that concept of a part of the chord remaining constant as everything moves around, maybe the bass notes are moving around, in the soliloquy, Alex does something similar to that. Now, if we think about this all rooted in an open D chord, now there are variations on this one, but the idea is if you're fretting that that standard D chord, that D on the top can stay there all the time. Now sometimes, if you listen closely, he's not always hitting that D. Sometimes he's stopping at the G. But the idea is if we play this chord, then it moves up to an F, but that D from that D chord stays there. And on the second time around, he actually plays a D at 9. Really, really nice effect. It's, pretty traditional chord progression, but played with a lot of feel. And then just keeping elements of that D chord on top is a really, really nice effect. Let's take a closer listen to that. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. I'm also on social media, especially on Facebook. I've got the Lonely Rockers Club on Facebook, all kinds of conversations in there, and some of the topics that we've talked about there have turned into videos over here. Great place to hang out. I'll put a link in the description. Hope to see you there. So now it's time to introduce the rush chord. That's so signature Alex Lifeson. It's pretty simple, actually. You just take a standard major chord that's rooted on the E string, take like an A major, played that chord a million times. The idea is to lift it so you open up the E and the B on the top. So you're left with fretting the lower portion of the chord, the root, the fifth, the octave, and the third. And you can move it to a few different places. Now we're going to apply this to hemispheres. We're back into another concept, this Cygnus X-1 Book II. And this progression, he's actually moving this shape. It's a one shape. He does it at F sharp. He moves it up to B. Moves it down to A, and then up to D. So it's that major chord that's just floating around the neck and keeping the E and the B constant along the top. Let's take a listen to that. So up next is one of my favorites. This is a song called Natural Science from Permanent Waves. And this arpeggio riff that he plays, it's early in the song. It starts off really clean, it builds up, and then when the band kicks in, he plays it distorted. They love that riff so much, actually. If you listen to later versions or live versions of that song, they actually repeat the section twice, which they didn't on the album. They probably realized they should have done that in the first place because it's such a cool riff. But anyways, the idea is it starts on an E here, and you're just looking at a simple 5 where you have an E and a B. Then you've got the another B on the top end, so you get it like a double B. And then he moves that shape down to a C, but he keeps the two B's on the top. But here's a little twist to that. He plays a sort of a D, and then he does a little walk up from B, which is B, C, D, and then it repeats again on the E. So you have the B on top for the first two chords, the E and the C, and then when he drops it to the D, you now have that D on the top, and then a little walk up from B, C, D, and then back to the E, and it repeats. Really, really cool riff. Let's take a closer listen to that. It's so hard to choose your favorite song from your favorite band, never mind a favorite chord progression within one of your favorite songs. But this chord progression is just so special to me. I absolutely love it. I think it's a great example of how Alex brings a really different level or different element in a rock context. It makes the chords just sound bigger and more interesting, adds melody and some dissonance. Really, really cool. And that would be the chord progression in the choruses of Limelight. And it all starts on a G sharp, a suspended 7 chord, which would sound familiar if you're a Beatles fan. But the difference is he opens up the top, exposing the open B. So we get this effect on the first chord. Just so melodic. And then it drops down to an E chord with this B flat on top. So that dissonance is really cool. And then the familiar rush chord, where he plays it like this. It's that open B at the top of every chord that makes this signature Alex Lifeson. Let's listen to it all together. And now it's time to reveal the final artwork. I'm so thrilled how this turned out. I really think it captures the essence of Alex Lifeson, and especially that iconic Gibson Howard Roberts Fusion guitar. I think this would look great as a print in the studio. What do you think? Well, it's already done. I'm so excited about this. I think it's going to look wonderful here in the Lonely Rocker studio. I just got to find some wall space, but I can assure you that I will. I really want to thank my sister Rochelle so much for creating this. So number one, I think it really elevated this video. And number two, this is a wonderful piece of art that I'm going to enjoy for years to come. Speaking of my sister, I'm going to put links in the description. Rochelle's got all sorts of artwork. She's not just tracing photos, she does original artwork, and you definitely want to check it out. Look for links in the description. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with me, I'm on Patreon. I have affiliate links, I have merch, all sorts of things to help this channel, all in the description. Every little bit helps. But the most important thing is to check out another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I look forward to seeing you again in another video.